Tomorrow morning, a decorated soldier in a wheelchair was set to be executed for a crime he swore he didn't commit. The courtroom had already condemned him until his loyal K9 suddenly stepped forward. And when the dog spoke, the judge fell to his knees and the entire court went silent. Before we start, make sure to hit like and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The courtroom felt colder than any battlefield he had ever known. Sergeant Cole sat in his wheelchair, hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what was about to happen. His decorated uniform couldn't protect him here. Across the room, whispers hissed like snakes, accusing, judging, condemning. The prosecution had painted him as unstable, dangerous, a man driven out of control by the scars of war. And no matter how many times he insisted he was innocent, no one listened. Tomorrow morning, the state would execute him. Only one soul believed him, his K9 partner, Shadow. The German Shepherd stood pressed against Cole's leg, ears stiff, eyes locked on the courtroom as if sensing an invisible threat. Shadow hadn't stopped growling since they entered, especially whenever his gaze passed over certain officials. Cole tried to calm him, but the dog refused. And deep down, Cole wondered if Shadow knew something the court didn't. Before the courtroom, before the accusations, before the wheelchair, there had been sand, fire, and the steady heartbeat of danger. Cole could still smell the dust of that desert mission, could still hear the distant rattle of gunfire echoing across the barren hills. Shadow had been right there beside him, never more than a few feet away, trained to sense explosives, ambush, even lies. Together they had survived every nightmare the war threw at them. Until the night everything went wrong, their unit had been sent on a classified operation, one that should have been routine. But in the dead of night, an explosion tore through their convoy. Cole remembered being thrown through the air, metal shrapnel ripping through his legs. Shadow had dragged him out of the burning vehicle, refusing to leave him behind. Through the smoke, Cole had seen something he was never meant to see: a high-ranking officer abandoning the team and destroying evidence of his involvement in illegal arms deals. That officer later claimed Cole caused the disaster. And now, that same man, calm, polished, unreadable, sat in the courtroom. Circled by Shadow's unwavering stare, the air inside the courtroom grew tighter with every passing minute, as if the walls themselves were pressing inward. Witness after witness took the stand, each one delivering polished statements that only deepened Cole's despair. They spoke with rehearsed precision, claiming he had acted irrationally, ignored protocol, and triggered the explosion through negligence. Every word felt like a nail sealing his coffin. Cole tried to respond, but the judge cut him short each time, insisting the court had heard enough already. Shadows from the overhead lights stretched across the room like long fingers, clawing at what little hope remained. But Shadow, the dog who had saved Cole's life more times than he could count, wasn't fooled. The German Shepherd stood rigid, eyes fixed on a single man seated behind the prosecution table. The same man Cole had seen through the smoke on the battlefield. The man who now avoided the dog's gaze at all costs. Shadow's growl started low, a rumble of warning. People shifted uncomfortably. A murmur spread through the crowd. The judge pounded his gavel, demanding silence, but even he seemed unsettled by the dog's behavior. Cole felt it too. Shadow wasn't reacting out of fear. He was reacting out of recognition. By now, Cole's attorney looked defeated. Papers lay scattered across his desk, each one a reminder that the truth had been buried under lies stronger than any wall. But then, in a moment of desperate inspiration, he stood and cleared his throat. "Your Honor, if the court refuses to hear Sergeant Cole, then at least hear the one witness who was there the entire time." All eyes shifted toward Shadow. A ripple of disbelief moved through the courtroom. "The dog?" someone scoffed. The prosecution laughed outright, but the judge, weary and running out of patience, finally nodded. "Fine, bring the K9 forward. Let's end this circus." Cole's heart pounded as Shadow stepped toward the center of the courtroom. His paw pads struck the marble floor with firm, deliberate taps, each one echoing in the silent chamber. He didn't glance at the crowd. He didn't wag his tail. Instead, he stared straight at the circled officer, the man whose hands were folded too neatly, whose jaw clenched too tightly. Suddenly, Shadow's entire body lowered. His fur bristled. A deep growl reverberated through the room, louder than before, primal and undeniable. Gasps erupted. A woman covered her mouth. Even the judge leaned back. This wasn't obedience. This was accusation. For several seconds, no one moved. Shadow's growl vibrated through the courtroom like a warning from something far more ancient than war or justice. The circled officer shifted in his seat, forcing a stiff smile, but sweat glistened at his temples. Then the courtroom doors creaked open. A man in a military uniform entered Dolder. Limping slightly, carrying a binder marked with faded army insignias. "Your Honor," he said, saluting. "I'm Sergeant Halle. I was the communication officer for Cole's K9 unit overseas. And I need to speak. Because that dog isn't acting randomly." The judge eyed him warily. "Explain." Halle stepped beside Shadow, kneeling as the dog's growl softened into a series of short, controlled vocalization sounds that seemed too deliberate to be instinct. Hale's face grew pale. "Your Honor, these aren't barks. These are coded signals." Shadow was trained in an advanced communication system, gestures, tones, sequences. He's giving testimony the only way he knows how. A wave of whispers swept through the room. Shadow barked twice, then made a sharp circling motion with his paw, one used only in the field to signal betrayal. Halle swallowed. He's identifying the man responsible for sabotaging the mission. All eyes turned toward the circled officer. Shadow suddenly lunged forward, not to attack, but to point, stance rigid, tail straight, ears locked. The dog was delivering a soldier's verdict. The courtroom exploded into chaos. Chaos pulsed through the courtroom, but the judge's voice thundered over it. "Order! Order!" He pointed at the circled officer, who now sat frozen, face drained, hands trembling. "Explain yourself," the judge demanded. The officer opened his mouth, but only a choked breath came out. Before he could fabricate a lie, Sergeant Halle lifted his binder. "Your Honor, these are encrypted mission logs. Ones I wasn't supposed to keep, but I did." His hands shook as he opened the binder, because something about that night never made sense. The bailiff rushed to connect a projector. Suddenly, grainy footage filled the courtroom wall, the missing body cam recordings from Cole's destroyed unit. Gasps broke out immediately. There he was. The circled officer, planting explosives, sabotaging equipment, destroying evidence, and leaving Cole to die. Cole stared, breath caught in his chest. Shadow whimpered softly beside him, as if remembering the smoke, the fire, the betrayal. The officer bolted toward the exit, but Shadow lunged, blocking his path with a commanding snarl. He froze, defeated, as marshals swarmed him. The judge's gavel fell from his hand, clattering to the floor. He pressed a shaking palm over his mouth, eyes brimming with shock and shame. Then, overwhelmed, he sank to his knees in front of Cole. "Sergeant, forgive us," he whispered. "You were seconds from execution, and you were innocent." The courtroom fell silent. No one breathed. Shadow rested his head gently on Cole's knee, just like he had on the battlefield, once again saving his life. Hours later, the courtroom steps were filled with reporters, veterans, and strangers who had witnessed justice return from the dead. Cole rolled out into the sunlight, a free man, his chest rising with a breath he felt he hadn't taken in years. Shadow walked proudly beside him, tail lifted, eyes bright. The judge himself approached, holding a small velvet box. "For extraordinary bravery," he said, kneeling to pin the medal onto Shadow's harness. Cole's voice cracked as he whispered, "You saved me." "Again, buddy."